It sure is.
Our visit this morning with Bob Pollock, presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row. Best of Indiana County contests. You can visit them online at marcusandmack.com. So 7 degrees, our current temperature in downtown Indiana. Wind chill puts it down there around 0. And the question then becomes, do we need to do anything with those plants that we have in the outdoors? That's one. But I also wanted to talk about plants that are near windows, indoors, and if those leaves are touching the glass.
Oh.
What's that do to them? Anything?
Yeah. Well, you want to answer number 2 first, and then we'll go back to number 1?
Do number 2 first.
Okay. Yeah, anything that's, well, the windows, are they single pane, double pane? But really, they shouldn't be touching the windows anyways, warm or cold. But the cold, it's cold enough on the glass that they would get cooked.
Frozen.
So keep them back,
Yeah.
Keep them back.
Keep them back from the windows. Yeah. And obviously, if there's a draft of any sort, you've got bigger issues than just your plants.
Right. Yeah. And that most house plants will take that. Although, just having air circulating around, more like we might have outside, some of those plants, especially indoors where the humidity is less anyway, typically, that air movement can cause more respiration in the plant, which then you could get some yellowing or browning leaves over time, as a result of that, because they don't have enough moisture to replace what's losing because of the drafts or the air movement.
Is air circulation a big issue for indoor plants, and especially plants that are typically outside during the warmer weather?
Not so much.
Okay.
It definitely affects them, but they seem to adapt pretty well to those environments, and we don't have a lot of trouble with it. We probably have more issues because of the soil dries out too quick and the lack of humidity tend to cause more problems. So you might start to see a leaf start to yellow here or there over time, and then of course, usually once it yellows, it either drops off like that or it will turn brown, or you'll get brown edges around the edges of the leaves. Then you need to look at, okay, is it a moisture issue, humidity issue? Is it a soil issue? Because we can get that from underwatering or overwatering. Kind of get the same response.
Therefore, it could be a drainage issue, too.
Yes. So that leads us to look at the container, the pot itself. Does it have a drainage hole or does it not? So on those plants where we don't have drainage holes in the pots, and there's a lot of, really nice decorative containers, that might be the reason you buy it. It pairs well with the plants you have, looks nicer than a plastic pot, and so we select that. But then we have to monitor that a little closer when we water, pay attention to that a little more, because it's more easier to overwater those plants that don't have a drainage hole. The other thing that can build up are salts. So if we're fertilizing regularly, we always mix up fertilizer in our water when we water, then we can build up. The plant may not use all those nutrients, but those nutrients excess don't have anywhere to go. They're in the pot.
Yeah.
So that can build up, and we can get root burning, which will then lead to, things don't quite look right on the top of this plant. Well, it's because the roots are dying.
Plants are suffering.
Yeah. Are they dying because they have too much water? Or are they dying because of something else, like fertilizer burn? And then we can get into pot bound, and all that. But
yeah. All right, so those are indoor plants.
A lot of times, yeah, and on those, sometimes we've got to pull the plant out of the pot to determine those things. We can't just look at the top, look at the symptoms on the leaves, and say, oh, this is what it is. We may have to.
People get afraid to do that, though.
Yeah, and you shouldn't. especially if we're trying to figure out why this plant isn't doing as well. And if we know what it is, that can be a thing we have to figure out also.
Yeah, wow.
We got it because it looked nice. We have no idea. That name was 5 syllables and 25 letters long, and just not remembering what that name is. But it helps to know what it is or figure it out so that we can look, oh, well, this thing needs full sun, or no, geez, I put it in full sun in a south-facing window, and it needed to be in a north-facing window.
Yeah. Plus, when you pull it out, there's a good chance you're going to find those roots all wrapped around in a circle.
They'll be wrapped around.
Then you're going to have to do something.
And there's plants, and you can see that on the top growth, has it slowed down in the amount of growth that it's having, is maybe a little portion of the plant declining or dying. Those can also be signs that we need to. Some plants will spread, faster than others. Some stay pretty stable and don't change a lot. They'll grow. They'll put on some more leaves, but others will have rhizomes, or other stolons or other structures that will allow that plant to divide itself, and then it'll outgrow the pot.
Yeah. All right. So let's go outside. And when we talk about plants and their reaction to extreme cold weather, and this is extreme cold, it's not as cold as it has gotten in the past, but as zones have changed and the definitions of what plants go for what zones do, some that might be more suited to warmer climates are now zoned for here in Pennsylvania. And maybe they're not quite as hardy in the cold weather. So let's talk about those ones and what we can do for those particular plants. I'm thinking of peach trees. There's not a whole lot we can do with a whole tree.
Right.
But what are some of the things we do with plants that are maybe a little more susceptible to cold weather?
And, even peach trees, in most cases, they're hardy enough. Now, there are cultivars that are hardy enough to grow here. And there are others that are marginal yet, better grown down south, a little warmer climate. A lot of times where we get into trouble with peaches is in the spring. They tend to, they tend to bloom earlier, and so we get into trouble there. But the plant itself is hardy enough in most cases if we've selected the right cultivars and rootstocks. And there are some newer ones on the market now that we haven't had access to before that I think are going to also, continue to help with that as we move along in time. Other plant, there's a whole bunch of hollies and other plants that are zone 6 or we used to always go with zone 5. You can still do that to be safe because here we are, single-digit weather. Always seems to happen for a little bit. It may not be as prolonged, but it still happens. And some of those plants may or may not be able to take that. And a lot of that goes back to how did we site that plant? Where in the landscape did we place that plant? Is it in a more protected location? Which if we're experimenting, if we're trying these things out, and we want to be successful at it, then and it has that plant has a lot of nice attributes that we'd like to introduce to our garden, then we need to think about, can we put this where maybe it's not as susceptible to the winter winds, so a less open place, a place that's a little more protected, that will help. And then our soil conditions, providing the right soil, an area that will support that plant that it needs, and that includes fertility and soil pH, matching those up so that we're providing the best place for that plant to grow and thrive. Mulching, especially when we get into this colder weather, having a mulch layer on there so that the temperature changes are not as abrupt. That's what we're trying to accomplish with with mulch, whether it's a straw mulch or a bark mulch or any mulch. We're trying to not have the ground freeze or thaw. Goes both ways too quickly. So that layer helps slow that whole process down. And so that can allow plants to transition better. So they can handle it, but it's those abrupt changes that tend to really get us in trouble and can get us in more trouble easier with plants that are marginal for our area.
All right. So some of those smaller plants that are out there that might be a little more marginal, yes, we can mulch them on the ground. Can we cover them?
We can put put up some fence,
A barrier around
a barrier. Yeah, especially if it's maybe, and maybe we're trying to get that plant established, and once it gets established, it'll be better and more able to handle that stuff. So putting up a wind barrier breaker. Of course, we've done that. You do this with some plants. You've done this with roses for years. Where you put mulch, whether it be leaves or straw, inside a fence, just to help
pile them up.
protect that. Yeah,
Pile them up in there. All right, there you go. Little cold weather advice for you here. It's the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. As always, check out Penn State Extension. They got all kinds of flyers and cool things online. It's the voice of Indiana County. Fox News coming up next. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160.